clinical psychologist, and I'm very excited to be here to be talking about the psychology of weight loss, and specifically on body image, self-esteem, and shame. I'm here today with the Kalili Center. It is a multidisciplinary surgical center featuring general and bariatric surgery. And this topic is very dear to me and motivated me a lot in certain ways to think about my own life. And two topics came up for me when I explored it within myself, and why I've chosen to work in this area of psychology is, one, when I was a child, I had osteomyelitis, and it was from the ages of about 10 to 16. And what it did to me was, apart from causing me to be in a wheelchair and also causing me to have crutches and have difficulty walking, it also caused me to gain a lot of weight. And that weight gain made me very self-conscious and made me feel a lot of shame about my body. So on top of feeling bad about the way I looked because I basically couldn't walk, I also was very heavy, and I experienced a tremendous amount of shame, and something I dealt with throughout my entire life. So when I had started to lose the weight, I realized that the weight loss alone was not going to be enough, that I still was holding on to those feelings of insecurity, shame, self-consciousness, self-doubt, things I had to deal with the rest of my life and continue dealing with. So that's a very powerful inspiration for me to be working here and working in this world of weight loss psychology. The other very powerful experience as a child was my parents were both survivors of the Holocaust, and they had tremendous atrocities to deal with, atrocities that I can't even imagine overcoming and experiencing. But what they did that was so powerful for me and unique is that they traveled to Canada, where I was from, and they created a whole new life for themselves, and they had the courage to do that and to meet their obstacles and to overcome them and be strong and have a lot of fortitude. And that inspiration in my life caused me to be a psychologist, caused me to deal with my own issues, and it's that kind of courage that I want to share with patients who are facing these issues of weight loss. I've learned why this is so important is a lot of times people come to me and they say they've tried many different kinds of dieting, they've yo-yo diet, they've gone from one extreme to the other, and they never seem to be able to maintain the weight loss. And one of the things I've learned that as a psychologist is that so many people don't deal with the underlying issues of what causes them to gain weight, the emotional issues that put them there in the first place. And so few diets and nutritional plans address that in enough critical fashion to really help people. So that was the idea of working here and doing these webinars is we want you to think of them as an adjunct to any weight loss program that you're trying it. Whether it's a diet-like program or whether it's weight loss surgery or a combination of all of it, if you're going to have the most success, you're probably going to have it because you found a way to deal with your issues, your psychological obstacles in the most profound way, and turn those obstacles into powerful moments and not things that debilitate you. One of the ways I want to deal with this is to talk about the different attributes that come into play when we're dealing with weight loss psychology. It's like this mosaic that forms, and some of these attributes are more powerful in some people, some are more powerful in others, and some play out at certain points during our weight loss process, but they're all important for us to examine. The first one is a sense of humiliation, that so many people who have dealt with weight and dealt with weight their whole life feel the sense of self-consciousness, humiliation, sense of feeling bad about who they are and what they've become, feeling like a failure. And this became very evident to me as a psychologist working at the Kalili Center in their bariatric division. Is I was doing an intake with a patient, and I noticed as the patient came down the hallway that he was quite a large individual. And I thought that the chair that was actually in the office was not large enough. So I quickly went and got a larger chair to accommodate this gentleman. And what I realized is that when he saw me taking this chair, this sense of humiliation that was instant came right over him. And I could just feel how bad he felt. And I thought, God, this must have happened to this guy so many times in his life. And here I was perpetrating it again. And I thought, what can I do as a psychologist to stop this feeling? Now, my first go-to reaction would be to make a joke out of it, but I didn't want to make it trite. I wanted to experience what this gentleman was experiencing and it. So I quickly thought of something. I went and I got a same large chair and I brought it into the office and I sat down with him. And the reason I did that is because I thought to myself, I want this guy to know that there is no separateness between the two of us, that I feel like an equal. And without telling him about my own background and struggle with weight, I wanted him to get a sense that I understood who he was and I was willing to sit in his pain. And we sat there, and for a moment we looked at each other, and I didn't know if he understood what I was doing, but I know that he knew that I was making an effort to be there with him in that moment, and that effort spoke volumes. And we sat there together, and we sat there quietly, and we probably didn't start the intake for a good minute or two. And it was very emotional, and he got teary-eyed, and I kind of was holding it back myself. And then we took a deep breath, and I felt like in that moment, there was a lot of healing that happened. And I made him feel like it was okay, and he made me feel like I was okay too, that he appreciated the effort I was making. So humiliation can come in so many forms. It can come as something as subtle as that experience that I explained, or something much more dramatic. But the important part is people who are struggling with weight a lot of times have that experience, and we need to acknowledge it within them in order for them to actually be able to move through it and to move on. Another important attribute that I want everyone to think about and meditate on and contemplate was this feeling of defectiveness. So many patients I see feel like there's something inherently wrong with them, that maybe if they tried harder, or if their will was stronger, they'd be able to lose the weight. That they would look at what they call normal people out there in the world, and they would say, well, how come those people can do it and I can't? So there must be something inherently defective in me. And I also hear that comment from a lot of people dealing with addiction, that somehow there's something inherently wrong with me. And what I want to stress is, it isn't that there's something inherently wrong with you. It is this feeling that these are the issues you've got to deal with, and other people have other issues to deal with. And there's a complex reason why you've gotten to this moment of dealing with your weight. But if you could, instead of understanding that nobody's perfect and everyone deals with them in a certain way, and to have the courage to say, well, this is what I'm facing. Other people are facing other things. There's nothing defective with me. It's just the challenges that I have to deal with, and the challenges that are ultimately going to make me a stronger person. Because if you think of yourself as a defective person, you're going to think of yourself as a shameful person. And the moment you have shame, then you have this slippery slope into poor self-esteem, self-destructive behavior, maybe a lot of narcissism in order to deal with your insecurities. It's not a road that's going to serve you. So you've got to not think of yourself as being defective. Dealing with a lot of people who make the choice to have weight loss surgery, the other issue that I hear, and I also hear it in other patients I deal with in my own practice, who maybe aren't facing weight loss surgery but wanting to lose a certain amount of weight, is the sense that they feel like a failure, that somehow they've come to this place in their life and they're not able to do or overcome what they needed to overcome. And actually, I am reminded of an interview I just heard actually today with Chris Christie, and he was talking about his mother, who was addicted to smoking. And he talked about how his mother had tried her whole life to quit smoking. She had done everything from the patch to different forms of smoking cessation programs. But ultimately, she was unable to quit. And in her early 70s, she was diagnosed as having lung cancer. And he said the feeling that came over her was this tremendous feeling of failure, that somehow she should have been able to overcome it. But Chris Christie said, and I agree with him on this statement, that addiction is a complex issue. And I've said this before, that it's not a matter of just willpower. It's a matter of insight. It's a matter of trying to understand who we are, what our genetics are, because that can play an important part of it, and how that played into dealing with what we're dealing with. And for a lot of people, food has very similar qualities to addiction. And we have to deal with it in that respect, that there's this addictive quality, and we have to find ways to constructively deal with them. And again, not deal with them in ways of shame. Another issue that I've seen with people that tend to plateau at a certain amount of weight and they can't seem to get past it is this sense of the success of weight loss will actually cause them more anxiety the sense of being successful at weight loss will actually cause them ultimately more anxiety than the actual weight loss, and they tend to revert and gain the weight back. This is a difficult thing to contemplate as a psychologist, and I started to think about it, and I thought that this plays into the dynamic of fear of success, that when we become successful at our weight loss and we start to see a new body that's starting to emerge, that new body may bring with it a certain sense of anxiety. For instance, if we were bullied at school or made fun of or felt less than, those feelings will start to surface in the process. And what will happen is when we really connect and say, hey, I'm not that person anymore, but I don't know who I am, the sense of the unfamiliar can cause a tremendous amount of anxiety psychologically and psychically. So what people will do is they'll tend to revert unconsciously and want to go back to the safe place. Because we know this as psychologists, the thing that people are the most scared of is the sense of the unknown. They want to feel comforted. They want to feel secure, even if that comfort and security is something that's uncomfortable. At least it's something that's safe. So that becomes an interesting dynamic to play with, the sense of having the perfect body, and how that fantasy can actually be more frightening than one anticipated. And when you get closer to it, it may cause you to actually gain more weight and go back to where you were to maintain that safety. The need for love is an interesting concept. I had a patient recently, and she talked about this concept of her and her sister were twins. She was overweight, her sister was at a normal weight. And her mother, unfortunately, favored the thinner sister and would say to her, I wish you could become like your sister. And what she was saying was, I wish you could become thin like your sister. And this created a lot of low self-esteem in my patient. She felt all the things that we've talked about, defective. She felt an inability to take control of her life. And she felt this desire to really want to be loved. And she felt that she never had that experience from her parents. And if she lost the weight, it was an interesting dynamic. The fear that she had was she would start to feel thin again, but feel thin for the first time. And then she'd have to come to terms with the feeling that her parents really, in her opinion, didn't love her in the same way that they loved her sister. That experience, again, can be so emotionally difficult for someone to grasp that they'd rather stay this larger person and maybe live in this fantasy world that their parents cared for them equally. Unfortunately, it would be nice to believe that all of our parents care for us equally, but that's not always the case. And our society makes us believe that that's something that should, quote, never happen, but unfortunately it does. And the last dynamic I wanted to explore as we think about this concept of body image, self-esteem, and shame was that body armor can be a powerful sensation for people. In other words, if you've felt traumatized in your life and you feel like you're very vulnerable to the world, perhaps something you could do is if you gain the weight and you keep the weight, it's like a protective layer against the world, a protective layer symbolically and metaphorically from keeping you vulnerable to the world. So again, it goes along with the same theory that we keep tapping into in different ways, that the process of losing weight is also the process of getting in touch with emotions and feelings. And if you don't have the right support or don't have the right tools to deal with that, what that may be experienced as is just this tremendous amount of anxiety, and then food becomes something that soothes that anxiety, and one gets caught in this whirlwind of perpetual yo-yo dieting, for instance. So again, I want to stress that the most successful people usually are in their weight loss program is correlated a lot of times with their ability to deal with the emotional aspect and the feelings and psychological experiences that brought them to that place. So here's, as we wrap up this part, and then I have a bunch of questions that are popping up, so I want to address them too. I want to give you some tools, and they're psychological tools to deal with in order to make yourself a stronger person and be more successful in your weight loss. The first is, it's an interesting paradox. We all live in this society, especially myself, living in Los Angeles, where everyone wants to be perfect and have the perfect body. So we strive for perfection. At the same time, we know it's a paradox. We can never reach perfection. So we think to ourselves, okay, well, if I'm never going to be perfect, I might as well give up on it. But that's not the issue. It's like the athlete who strives for the best score, knowing that they're not always going to get it, that perfection is impossible. So you can try to do the best you can with whatever program you choose to do, but understand that as long as it's good enough, you're okay. It's this concept that we use in psychology of parenting, this concept of good enough parenting, that parents aren't expected to be perfect. But if there's more good than there was, let's say, negative experiences, chances are the child will have resiliency and be able to be successful in life. Think of your weight loss process that way too. It just needs to be good enough. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes you won't have the perfect body. But if you stay focused and knowing that these little things that you interpret as failures are not necessarily failures, but they are natural in how people lose weight. It's that sense of rapprochement. You take 2 steps forward, take 1 step back, take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. One day you're off your diet, you go right back on. But in the big sense of the picture, you're able to applaud yourself and say that you were able to be successful in your weight loss, and the proof will be in how you're able to maintain that weight loss. So be a little gentler on yourself. For a lot of people, feelings can be very confusing, and the ability to tolerate feelings can be very difficult, especially if we come from backgrounds where feelings are thought to not be something that someone should even pay attention to. I grew up in a background where I was taught, guys don't deal with feelings. Guys just, if you have something bad happen to you, I don't know, you go out and you have a drink and hope it's all over. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And what happens is If you don't develop the ability to deal with your feelings and tolerate them and work through them and process them, you're not going to get to the other side of insight. So in other words, the feeling may happen first, it may be difficult and may take a long time to get a handle on, but as you do and you learn to tolerate them and then create some insight that they give you, that's where the change may start to happen. So learn to tolerate your feelings. A third concept is the concept of process that rather than act out. Act out is what we do with food. We get anxious, we grab something to eat. We get really anxious, we grab a lot of things to eat. We get sad, we go to food. So we don't learn, unfortunately, in a lot of our families and in our society, how to process these feelings and not act out on them. So the more you can learn to do that, the better off you'll be, the more you'll be able to tolerate certain feelings. So as you can see, some of these concepts overlap, but they're all interconnected. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a good support system, whether that's in a relationship, in a support group, in therapy. I'm very well aware that the patients at the Kalili Center where I work at, the ones that seem to come to our support groups are usually the ones who are the most successful because they start understanding what the process of bariatric surgery is and weight loss surgery and where people are at in different stages and what to expect in the early stages, what to expect 5 years later. And also there's a bond that people don't feel so alone in their process. That a lot of people who tend to have weight issues seem to have them and then they isolate a great deal. And then that just creates the cycle of depression, which can lead to food, etc. So not the most positive choice to make. And finally, something to think about that sometimes I've seen in a lot of patients that they tend to stuff their feelings, and it's a great metaphor for how they feel around food. So they stuff their feelings and they use food to stuff it. I would stress to you that learn to talk about your feelings, learn to be assertive. There's a big difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Assertive is taking your place in life and being who you are and not being shameful about it. Aggressiveness is this desire to want to destroy people in the process. This is not what it's about. That this is about being who you are and being the best you could be. And also recognizing that the more personal you can get in your weight loss, the more successful you'll probably be. Find very personal reasons as to why you want to do it. I'm working with a guy right now, and it's very clear to him that he's 40 years old, he's morbidly obese, he has 3 children, and he wants to be there to see his kids grow up. And that's a powerful motivating factor for him. That and I know he's going to be successful because his kids are so important to him, and he also wants to be able to play with them and to go to their games and to go to their teachers' meetings, and right now he can't. And that feeling inside of him is so powerful, it's motivating him to stick with the surgery. So I'm going to take a few questions here. I've got them, and I want to be able to share them with everyone. One is, Martin writes that he has been yo-yo dieting his whole life, and his doctor suggested weight loss surgery, and he doesn't want to do it because he feels like he's a failure. And he asked 2 questions. He asked, is he the only one who feels that way, and what he thinks he should do about it? As someone who works in the field of weight loss surgery as a psychologist, I do hear this a lot from patients, that they get to this point, they come and see us, and they feel like this tremendous failure. It's an interesting paradox to me because I feel like it's a sign of tremendous courage. Because what someone is saying is, I want a tool. I want something that's going to help me get the success I want. For all the complex reasons that I've talked about in this webinar, I've gotten to this place where I realize I need more. And weight loss surgery can offer that element of more. Maybe it's a genetic issue you're dealing with. Maybe it's a severe issue of abuse. Maybe it's an issue of, not really comprehending the process. So for me, the ability to be honest with oneself and say, there's this great tool out there, I'm going to go and I'm going to take advantage of it. I think that's a sign of courage. It's the naive person who thinks they could do it all on their own. Our president has his cabinet. Why would we ever think we're supposed to do everything on our own? Well, that's a whole nother webinar, but we won't get into that now. So Martin, I want to applaud you for your courage, and make sure you understand the process of weight loss surgery and the complexity of it. And if you're comfortable with that, you should go ahead and take the move. So Carol wrote me, and she said, I've lost a lot, about 80 pounds. And whenever I go into a store, I start to panic when the salesperson asks me what size I am. And she wanted to know what she can do about it. Again, an interesting, fascinating question. You would think that Carol would be happy about shopping in what she probably thinks of as a store with regular size clothing. But this goes back to my statement of a sense of self. I believe what's happening to Carol right now is she's gone beyond the sense of being a large person, and she doesn't know who she is as a thinner person and what that means to her and what those attributes mean. And it's almost as though she's having a bit of panic and PTSD trying to figure out who she is. And that sounds like an easy process, but if you spent most of your life being overweight and developed all this complex ways of dealing with emotional feelings around it, when suddenly you don't have that experience, you may be facing a sense of emptiness that you've never experienced before. And you need to pay attention to that. So what I would say to Carol is go slow. If you're experiencing a lot of panic, go slow. Maybe walk into the store one day, go with a friend, just walk in a little bit and see if it causes too much panic. If it does, leave, take a deep breath, come back at some other time. Don't be afraid to tell the salesperson what you're going through and see if they can offer you some sort of support in that way. You'd be surprised how caring people will be. So be honest, take your time, take small baby steps. You don't have to be a hero here. And another thought is, go around, look around the store, see what interests you, see who you would want to be. You'd be surprised, certain things that you thought wouldn't look good on you. Maybe you want to be a little sexy. Maybe that's available to you and feeling good about it. Take time with it, have fun. That's what I would reiterate. And the final question I wanted to address was Cheryl. She's an actor. I'll just paraphrase her question. She's an actress in Hollywood. A lot of her success is based on being a very thin person, and she's terrified that because of that, she has a poor body image because she sees herself always as being fat, and she feels that sometimes she has that pressure from her agents and directors and people around her, and she wants to feel good about herself, but at the same time she recognizes she has this professional obligation to be thinner. Just based on who she needs to be in order to work. What I would say to her is that it's a complex situation, is don't be afraid to find your own truth, whatever that size may be. And you may be surprised that if people see you a certain way, it might also, in other words, if you have your own truth about who you want to be and what you want to look like, you need to be able to hold on to that. And your energy a lot of times will communicate with others that you feel good about it, and that may help them feel better about it. If you walk into an audition and you're carrying around a lot of shame about who you are, chances are that the casting director or the director may unconsciously pick up on that, and they may not want to cast you for reasons that you're not even aware of. So the more you can find your own truth in the process, I think the better off you'll be. And the better off, actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you'd end up working more or getting more parts. So what I wanted to do, we're going to have to wind up for today, is we're just touching the surface of the psychology of weight loss. I wanted to focus on the issues of body image, shame, and self-esteem. I want you to think of them as, it isn't a linear process. It's this complex process of different issues going on. They're all moving around at the same time. Some pick their head up at certain times with more severity than others, but other times others feel resolved. And if you could understand that this isn't about quick solutions or instant solutions, because a lot of people dealing with weight have been given, the 5 easy steps to weight loss, and ultimately that just creates more shame in them because they've tried those 5 easy steps and they haven't been able to maintain the weight. What I'm advocating is it's a complex process, and it's a process that people can deal with, and the more you understand the complexity, the more freedom you're going to feel. And it is that freedom that ultimately is going to make you feel successful. And the last thing I want to say is, if you're watching this video, then you are successful because you've already taken the time to recognize that feelings are important in weight loss and that you're going to embrace them. And by just listening to this video and other videos like that, you've already begun the process of healing. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Howard Gluss.
Great job.